This video is sponsored by Manscaped. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show.
Somebody's gonna look at that and be like, oh boy, that guy's balling, huh? Yes, I would like a receipt. Great, awesome. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Yammy Noob, and today it is time for my first ride on the Royal Enfield INT 650. I'm actually really excited to talk to you guys about this motorcycle because I really like it. It's a great little bike, and we are giving it away as our brand new beginner bike giveaway. You can get yourself entered to win this here motorcycle by clicking the link down in the description below, going to yammynoob.co, getting yourself signed up, and you get access to the Discord server where Yam is doing weekly half-hour hangout sessions. You get a bunch of discounts on stuff like bikes from Eurocycle, which is actually where we bought this motorcycle. You get discounts on Twisted Road Rentals, discounts on shop.yammynoob.co. There's a ton of benefits to signing up on yammynoob.co, so check all that out down below, not least of which is getting entered to win this here motorcycle. Now, I have been riding this thing around. I've filmed a video or two with it already, so not going to be my raw first impressions today, but we are going to talk about a lot of the stuff that I felt as I've started riding this thing around. And for a beginner, this is an amazing package. And it's not just for beginners either. Somebody who's a vet who wants a second motorcycle that's perhaps nice and chilled out, great option. Somebody who just wants something cool and classic looking in their garage, great option. This is a very cool motorcycle, guys. Now, obviously, some features about this motorcycle that you've probably already heard Yam talk about: 650-ish cc air and oil-cooled parallel twin here, not a V-twin. I almost said V-twin because, you know, I think air-cooled, I think Harley. But yeah, this is a air and oil-cooled parallel twin, which we are going to talk about it because it's hot as balls out today, and I've got some developments there. We've got these piggyback shocks here with the Öhlins colored brass. The preload is adjustable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps of preload. Fake carburetors. This thing is in fact fuel injected. So the fake carburetors on there, generally really good looks, and to be honest, the build quality here is a lot more than I was anticipating. The build quality is really, really solid. Now, mounting up on the motorcycle, it feels substantial. It feels like a bigger motorcycle. I haven't seen my own reflection while I'm sitting on it, so I may still make it feel small, but for me, from the cockpit, it doesn't feel like a tiny bike, which is nice. And if we start it up, you can hear it start puttering away back there. Let me kick it up into neutral here. Let's give you guys some revs. Nice classic parallel twin sound out of this. That 270-degree crank in this bike sounds so nice. Definitely a bit of an underrated feature on this thing.
Real quick, let me pontificate on a question. If your bike is hot and your balls are furry like a mini Chewbacca in your pants, how are you going to have a good time? It's a good thing Manscaped has the Lawnmower 4.0 for you to trim yourself up nice and improve airflow down where the sun don't shine. Normally we joke about all that stuff, but with it being hotter than Satan's hot tub outside right now, you really owe it to yourself to get rid of all that unnecessary body hair. You'll cut down on the gooch juice, lower weight, and improve airflow all at the same time. Click that link down below and get 20% off your order automatically added, and treat your balls right.
Now, we are going to be taking it through these twisty roads here. But a bit of a disclaimer first and foremost. This motorcycle is not a sport bike. If you're trying to turn it into one, I wouldn't bother. You're not really going to be able to get amazing performance out of this thing. You can get it to handle fine. I mean, it already handles fine. It's a completely competent little motorcycle. But you're not going to get super sport performance out of it. So if you're looking for something that is cheap and handles like it's on rails, the Interceptor's probably not going to be for you. But beyond that, let's talk a little bit about how it goes down the road. It's surprisingly composed. That's one thing that really blew me away when I first got on we were testing out the Continental, the one that's got the, like, sort of lifted clip-ons. The bike rides like a proper motorcycle. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, gonna rattle itself to pieces. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall apart. It's a really composed package, and it does a good job of conveying you down the road. It doesn't do any weird stuff. It doesn't start, like, shaking and wiggling mid-corner. In fact, it really likes to just cruise going straight, you know? It naturally wants to straighten back up. I think that's probably down to a longer wheelbase and the skinny tires. It's not about, like, carving corners. It's about slowly chilling your way through these corners, you know? I said in my first ride that the Z900 was like a secret cruiser, but it had a lot of sporting inclinations. This thing is just full cruiser, right? This is a classic cruiser vibe. And sure, I mean, if you want to, you can get a little bit more zesty with it, but that's not what it's about. That's not why you get this bike. So, sure, you can party with it if you want, but why would you want to? You know, it's all about just enjoying the ride. Now, one thing I do want to talk about on this motorcycle is I want to talk about how everything feels, how the controls feel, because a lot of times on beginner bikes and cheaper motorcycles, which this particular version of the Royal Enfield you can get for $69.99, and then the base model is $5,999. So it's a $6,000 motorcycle with some really fancy chrome parts on here. That's the only difference. The only difference is the paint on this bike between the base and our model here. So any of the bikes that you get, regardless of the paint scheme, are going to have the same feel. Now, one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the grips are really thin. I don't know why it's bothering me on this motorcycle, but it kind of is. The grips feel like bicycle grips. They don't feel like motorcycle grips. Something about the handlebars being really, really narrow and the grips being super thin. So I think you could rectify that just by simply throwing another set of grips on here. I mean, these are plastic grips over probably a black plastic throttle tube, and then this is just glued directly to the handlebar. So you can go ahead and make that swap really, really easily. Again, I don't know why it's bothering me in this case, but I think it's because the rest of the bike is sort of a lot nicer, and this is one of your main contact points, feels a little bit chintzy, a little bit cheap. So simply upgrading your grips would do a lot to make this thing feel more beefy, I suppose. The next thing I wanted to talk about are the levers. So the lever feel is not amazing, but it's not bad either. The Bybri front brake is, you know, Yam first rode it and he said that it felt like ass. I was playing around with it in the shop and it didn't feel great, but after riding it around a good bit, it's starting to feel like maybe the pads have bedded in a little bit and it's feeling a little bit more pulled together. So I'm thinking that the brake setup on here, it's not as bad as we initially thought. The more you yank on the lever, the more the faults become apparent. Like here, let me pull onto this straight here, and yeah, I actually hit the front wheel ABS right there, which is kind of cool. But you know, it's not the greatest of feels out of this front lever, but it's not abysmal, I'll say. Perfectly adequate for the motorcycle. I'm getting enough feel to know exactly what it's doing. The initial bite, it's not that great. The first, like, until you really get into the lever pressure, it doesn't feel super solid. It feels a little soft and squishy. That's down to the master cylinder, so maybe we can swap that out. But it already has steel lines on it, which is pretty cool. Last thing I wanted to talk about is the transmission. Wow, is this transmission really good? It's a really good transmission. It's so snickety. It's every little click feels so well done. I honestly, my impression is that these guys spent their time and their effort and their money and their thought on the engine and the general package and the contact points. And they're like, we're going to get it as good as we can possibly get it, then you're going to have the motorcycle. That's kind of it. They just were like, it's going to be as good as we can get while keeping the price down. And I think they spent their time and their effort in the right spots, because this transmission, whether you're doing clutchless like this or whether you're clutching it in, it feels really good. It feels really good. And that is awesome. That's really awesome out of a bike like this. So that's going to do it for my twisty road thoughts. I'm going to pull the bike over, get some gas, and then we're going to head into a different city loop. I am modifying my loop a little bit today. And we're going to see how this bike feels in the city and see if the air and oil cooler setup on here can keep the bike from overheating on a 100+ degree day in Austin. Now, while I'm sitting here filling the bike up, I do want to shout out Flying Eyes. They do make these really nice sunglasses that fit easily into your helmet, and they're the sunglasses that I wear every time I get on a motorcycle. They're really comfortable under a helmet, and I do long day rides, and I couldn't do it without these sunglasses because my old ones had really thick stems and they cause a bunch of uncomfortable pressure points. So if you want to get yourself a pair of Flying Eyes, click that link down below and check them out. They've got a whole bunch of frames and styles, and let's go see how this bike does in the city. Yes, I would like a receipt. Great, awesome. Alrighty folks, so riding this thing around in city situations, the biggest thing that you're going to notice is that all of the power on this bike really is between 4,000 and 5,000 RPM. Yeah, there's more as you rev it up to the top, that's how engines work, but it doesn't really feel like it wants to rev out that high. This bike is a really slow revving engine. It's a lot like a Harley in that sense. So you're going to want to keep it where it feels happiest and then go from there, basically. And I find that the best spot to keep it is high 3s and a little over 5. Basically between 3,500 and 5,500 is where the party is, and that's where I try to keep this bike all the time. But we are going to get a nice little launch off this red light here, so let's see how it does doing some suburban hooliganism stuff. See when we get the light, see if I can catch it. Come on, light. So up to about 40 miles an hour in the space of an intersection. That's pretty good. The best thing I can say about this bike in the city is that it's comfortable and easy to ride. This bike's never going to get away from you. It's never going to feel like a handful. And you're going to be able to get around traffic pretty easily. Like, let's see here. I'll creep up on this caddy. And we'll just go around. Not even going to need to switch gears. Just roll on and we're good to go. You know, obviously this is more suburban roadways than cities, a fairly high speed limit and so forth. But for your average city commute, this thing is going to be perfectly adequate. And it is worth pointing out that I get a lot of looks when I'm riding this motorcycle. Not like, ooh, that guy's on a motorcycle. More like, ooh, look at that cool bike. You know, these things, for all of their other flaws that they may have, you know, they're not fast. They're not, the parts might be a little bit budget here and there. they do command a little bit of respect from folks when, you know, your average normie looks at this chromed out tank and all the chrome parts, and it's so flashy and gleaming in the sunlight. Somebody's gonna look at that and be like, oh boy, that guy's ballin', huh? It's a very cool bike. Now, let's talk a little bit about the air and oil-cooled setup here, because I know that some folks out there are who, you know, perhaps are thinking about starting on like a Ninja 400 or something like that. They're like, oh, I don't want an air-cooled motorcycle. What if it overheats? Guys, I'm currently riding around in Austin, Texas in the end of June, and it's probably a solid 100 degrees outside right now. I'm sweating when I'm going down the highway at 90 miles an hour. So just, that's how warm it is where I'm at right now. And this bike has yet to give me any issues. Now, admittedly, I haven't been doing stop and start in the city, so if I do end up doing that and I notice that, you know, going from red light to red light downtown, it gets a little bit more warm, I will let you know. But I have ridden, you know, old air-cooled Sportsters, and the thing that continually impresses me about these bikes is, yeah, they get hot when you're just idling, but the second you get moving, they cool right back down. And the oil cooler up there is nice because it's just, you know, it's cooling down the oil, and colder oil helps. So there you go. It's not as effective at making power, but you do get the trade-off of, I think, personally, I think air-cooled engines sound better than their liquid-cooled partners. I mean, let's talk about this air-cooled 650cc 270-degree crank versus another 650cc liquid-cooled 270-degree crank in the MT-07. That sounds like a modern sport bike thing. You know, this, it doesn't have that modern sound. It's got a lot more old school character to it. And some people really like that. And if you want that, you have to go air-cooled. You're never going to get a liquid-cooled engine to sound like this because they're at higher compression. This is just a low compression, lumpy motorcycle. And I love that. I love the way it sounds. Now, for those of you American watchers who are worried about whether or not the Royal Enfield can do highway miles, let's pull it on to 183 here and see if this humble little beginner bike has what it takes to compete with the average Texas commute. Alrighty folks, let's pull onto the highway and see what, I think I'm in third gear, what a third gear roll feels like. So we're starting at around 50 miles an hour, and we got a little runway, so let's do this. So I'm revving it all the way out here, guys. Basically all the way, as all the way as I want it to. And I saw on that about 85 miles an hour, and I think I was in, that was fifth gear. That's completely fine. This thing is completely capable of just cruising down the highway. Now, let's be real, it's not going to be the instant passing power you want, probably. If you're thinking that this is going to accelerate like an MT-09 or an MT-07 more appropriately, nah, it's not gonna. It's gonna be a little bit more like the KLR. It's not as slow as the KLR is, but let me show you relative to this Ford Edge here. So I'm gonna drop a gear and we're gonna roll on. That's full throttle, and there we go. Passing on the Royal Enfield requires a little bit more planning. You're not going to be able to just wick the throttle open and instantly accelerate around whoever you're trying to accelerate around. It's just, that's not what this engine is designed for. And if you're willing to meet the bike on its terms a little bit with regards to that, it's totally fine. Like, I'm going to get around this little VW totally fine. Speed is not going to be an issue on this motorcycle. So if you're worried about, oh, I need something a little bit bigger, I want to get the Bonnie because it's more capable on the highway. No, it's not any more or less capable than this thing is. So hopefully that puts that little thing to bed there. And that's going to wrap it up for me, guys. I think that this thing is... I think it's a really solid package, and I think we might have been wrong about the Royal Enfield. I really do. It's a good bike. It's a really good bike. And if you want to get entered to win this as your beginner motorcycle, click that link down below. Go to yammynoob.co where you get a whole bunch of cool things like discounts on motorcycles from Eurocycle, discounts on Twisted Road rentals, discounts on gear from the shop. You get 2 weekly live streams to Yamcast and Yam's new weekly 30-minute hangout session. A lot of cool stuff on the Discord server. Click that link down below. Go to yammynoob.co. Get yourself signed up. You're not going to want to miss out on this Royal Enfield. And I'm gonna go ahead and keep riding this motorcycle. I'm having a good time. I'll catch you guys in the next episode of Yammy Noob.
Keep watching Yammy Noob!